Hey friends, I want to welcome a new sponsor, TextControl.com. It's really amazing stuff. TextControl is a deep functionality component vendor. They're the creators of TX Text Control. It's a Word-inspired document editor library. It's a document processing engine for your apps. It's fully customizable, fully programmable, and it's available for most platforms. That means ASP.NET MVC, web forms, Windows forms, WPF. Recently, they actually released an Angular and Node.js version, so they can integrate their WYSIWYG document editing into your web applications. Now, a typical application for this would be like mail merge or blog or somewhere where like an MS Word compatible template gets merged, with some JSON data on the client, or even pure server-side apps where you can create an Adobe PDF document. It's really amazing. And what I love about it is that you can go and check out a live demo. TextControl.com/demos. TextControl.com, it is a full, basically Word in your browser. Document editing, creation, collaboration on any platform. Really, really easy for .NET folks to integrate. I was really impressed, and I'm really happy to have them as a sponsor. Hi, this is Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hansel Minutes, and today I'm talking with Yvonne Marcus. She's the host of Your Agile Home podcast that helps you develop flexible home management solutions. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am very well, and I'm excited to chat with you. You and I are both podcasters, and we are also parents. Of course, folks know I work from home, so at some point the boys will burst in the middle and interrupt this podcast and probably cause all kinds of trouble. So I'm always interested in new ways to parent, and you have some ideas around that.
Oh, absolutely. I am so excited about using Agile at home because I found that just asking my kids for solutions to their own problems opened us up to a world I didn't even know existed inside their heads.
How do we do things now? Are we just doing waterfall style project management with our lives at home?
Absolutely. I believe that parenting is sort of the last great waterfall. Like it just kind of keeps going. It's been kind of parents telling kids what to do and then kids following through or often not following through with the instructions. Because, how many times have you told your kids to go put their laundry in the hamper and it's not happened?
Well, always, every single time.
Yeah. And that sort of continues to happen when I'm using Agile, but at least now I know that moving the laundry hamper to a different location solved that problem 75% of the time.
Okay. So is this a fail fast, fail often thing? Because I have the fail fast, fail often part down. Everything is just a big pile of fail at this point.
That happens quite a bit. Yes. But we do find active solutions to problems, which is good. But yes, we do fail a lot and hard. But the good news is that failure then creates that feedback loop that's so important to be able to move on to a new solution quickly. And I find that the quickly is the biggest, most important thing because, if you sit there and you're like, this problem doesn't have a solution, and you just keep living with the system that you're using now, if you kind of are married to that, then you start to feel like a failure or like you're a bad parent instead of coming up with a solution that actually works.
Yeah.
And then being able to feel good about that problem being solved.
Right. We've talked about this on the podcast before, the idea of letting life happen by default. And we all get overwhelmed, and it's okay to be overwhelmed, whether it be in your personal life, if you don't have kids, or if kids are in your life like they are in ours. If you just do nothing, that is a decision. That is the default. And the default is waterfall. And it's just kind of like slowly dealing with these things and letting things happen. But you, if we back up a little bit, have a background in operations and business operations and basically getting things done in business. And then when you went to be a stay-at-home mom / CEO, home system strategist, right? You have a business to manage. You also have these small people to manage. What made you say, I'm going to go and take those operations skills and Agile and apply it to the management of the house?
because you are running a small business. Whether you like to think of it that way or not, you are running a house, and it has to be ran in a way that is efficient and that works, and that, just sort of manages different personalities, manages different people's time constraints, and just different people's strengths and weaknesses. Because one of the things I like to talk about is like chores. When you give your kids chores and you just assign them willy-nilly, it might not be something that is like their strong suit or that they're going to do well. Whereas if you sit down with the list of all the chores that are done in your house.
Hi, friend. Hey, buddy. I'm doing a show right now. Okay. Thank you, friend. I told you that would happen. But this is the one show I won't have to edit that out of, because the boys just got home from school and ignored the light.
Yeah, of course.
But building to their strengths, right, is the idea.
Yeah, building to their strengths, letting them self-assign tasks. I mean, even as adults, there are chores we don't like to do, right? And we don't have to do them. We should know how. And I think that kids should learn how to like unload the dishwasher. But if they're going to break all of your dishes because they're just not thinking about it and they're just kind of willy-nilly throwing things places, is it really something that you want them to do long-term?
Right. This is not your skill. You have to have a one-on-one with HR and the employee or the child and say, this is a skill that we don't think you have right now. We're going to assign that to someone else.
Exactly. And then, you just kind of let them decide what they're going to be good at right now. And then you teach them how to do all of the things. But in life, we're not set up so that like I have to cook dinner every night. And that's probably the real reason I started this business is because to me, the problem in parenting has been overall in society, we expect mom to be in charge of hashtag all the things.
Right. I think being at home is a largely gendered thing in Western culture, no question.
Yeah. And I was like, I can't do this. I don't want to be in charge of all the things. I don't want my kids to be raised seeing me in charge of all the things. So therefore, I have to start some sort of revolution, even if it's just in my house. But then it led to me creating this business in order to help it sort of move along, or to give people some instruction on how to get from point A to point B of just being harried and chaotic all the way to being like, oh, I've got this down because we're having a daily stand-up where we all go over our schedule. So
you call this Agile Home Management, or the Agile Home. Your Agile Home is the name of the podcast. Are we talking about like a morning scrum? Like, at work, we get up at 9 a.m., we have our scrum meeting. Are you doing that?
It's a little bit different. Every morning, we basically stand across the counter from each other and we do stand up and we talk about just what's on the schedule for the day. We don't really kind of go over what didn't get completed yesterday.
Yeah.
Because, there's always going to be something. But if it's not on our sprint, then we just kind of don't worry about it. It kind of gets pushed back onto the backlog. But we do get together every morning and sort of look at what time we have meetings so that we know, one, whether or not we can be in the same room at the time of the meeting, or if I need to go pick up the kids from school or my husband needs to go pick up the kids from school and who's doing drop off and those sorts of things, so that we just know who can be where at what time. And if somebody has more on their plate that day, then maybe somebody else has to pick up more of the slack, or that's a night that we decide to go out to dinner.
That is a really good point. The idea of collective ownership is fundamental to Agile. So in software, it's like there's you own this or you own that, but we always talk about the idea where we all have collective ownership of the positive, of the forward motion of the project. And when you formally decide as a family, all right, like we're all in this together, let's just make sure that we say that out loud. You just said something great where one person has more on their plate than the other. And they go, oh, I can take that today. You're not keeping score. You're really trying to balance the load across the family members and build to their strengths. I think that's great.
Yeah, it's absolutely 100% about being on a team, because as a family, that's what you want to be. So we got together and we had the kids involved and we set our family values and we set a mission statement. And then we live by that. So like before something even goes on our schedule, it's, does this align with our values and our mission statement? And if it doesn't, then we say no. And then everybody's on the same page about why we said no.
And that's really cool because you emailed me to be on the show after listening to my episode with my wife where we talked about mission statements. And you mentioned when you emailed me that it was nice to know that you weren't the only family that had a mission statement.
Exactly, because it sounds so nerdy when you like sit down and you actually write it. But then like when you hear other people are doing it, you're like, oh, maybe this is catching on a little bit.
It absolutely is. I mean, it's super important because we don't want our family to be top-down leadership, right? Like we did talk about a little bit of the historical things around gender roles and the positive things and the negative things. You know, there's both positive and negative, but it's certainly not top-down management, right? It's not I set the tone or my wife sets the tone, right? It is we set the tone as parents, and our children are, you know, team members, subordinates, but team members, and also really mediocre roommates as well.
Always.
Just such bad roommates.
But it's so good to be able to like have them be a collaborative member of the team and for them to just know. I mean, our family mission statement is really, really just pop culture things that we remember and we say frequently versus us actually writing a mission statement. But it's stuff that the kids have heard us say over and over again. Like, I don't know if you know the Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba.
I'm afraid I do. Please don't get it stuck in my head.
So that chorus is something that we start it and the kids will finish it because it's, you know, we know that we have to lift each other back up after we have a fall.
Okay, so the mission statement sets the tone, but are you changing your sprints, right? We usually have named sprints or themes for each of our sprints as we move through time.
Yes. So we at the beginning of a 2-week period, we sit down and we map out what we're going to get done in the next 2 weeks. And for us, it's really just kind of a list of either projects that we want to get done or appointments that we know that we need to do that are not either set yet or we don't really know where they fall into the schedule or that sort of thing yet. But we put them up. Actually, we use DACboard.com in order to display it on a television screen in our house, along with our schedule.
I am a huge fan of DACboard. So you've got to, I mean, I don't want to be the one to tell people about that, but you've got to talk about how DACboard is a game changer for families.
Oh, DACboard is phenomenal. Every time I get on a client call, I recommend DACboard. Because it's just so easy to put together because of the drop and drag features. And also it's just easy to reset up. Like I don't have to be a technology expert in order to go in and figure out how to put a countdown or how to put my schedule up. I just go and get like the iCal link for my calendar and zoom, there it is. And then everybody can see it. And making the work visible is the biggest game changer in parenting.
That is really significant. So for folks that might not understand what we're talking about, a DAC board, it's DAK board. We'll put a link in the show notes. And I've got a detailed explanation on my blog about how one can make their own DAC board. It is literally as easy as taking any random monitor or computer monitor that you have lying around. I got one for $20 at Goodwill. I took I happened to take the base off of it. So it's just a kind of a picture frame. And then I put a Raspberry Pi tiny computer inside it, and I hung it on the wall in the kitchen and put it on the Wi-Fi, and that was it. And like you said, from there on, you do all the management on their web interface, right?
Yes. And we use a television screen that we inherited, so it was free.
Even better.
But before we got the television screen, we used an iPad.
See? And these are the things. We have these things lying around or we've inherited them. And I have mine turn off at night so it saves power and things like that. And we've got on ours, we've got the weather, we've got countdowns to major events and things we're excited about. We've also recently added children's homework and color-coded it in different Google calendars.
Oh, that's super cool. I love that. My kids don't have homework yet because they're preschoolers.
Soon. It will sneak up on you. And then, of course.
So I'm going to have to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. And then when the boys got their iPads for school, we put Google Calendar on it, and then we have them enter their homework. And then we have 4 Google Calendars for me and mom and the 2 kids. And then we color coded it. They add their homework, drop it in, and then it automatically appears on the screen. And then, of course, I've mentioned this on the show before. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I travel, so we actually have my blood sugar as an item, as a thing on the dashboard. And this is an important metric for people to glance at, and the kids can see how daddy's doing even though he's not there.
Oh, I love that. I have also have an autoimmune disease, but it is fibromyalgia, so not very visible, period. And so the kids can't have really a visual for that, but it's good to know that there is a way to implement health metrics on the dashboard.
There is, and you could do all kinds of fun things. Like, you know how when you, like I was at the Chicago airport recently, and you leave the bathroom, and there's like how was your experience? And there's like 3 buttons: smiley face, kind of medium face, or sad face. Or you leave Target, and there's like, did you have a good experience? Thumbs up, thumbs down. You could build something like that and have the kids like, how was your day? And the kid could like push a button, and then you could have the pictures of the kids on the dashboard with a happy kid and a sad kid. And then you could glance at the screen and tell whether or not the kid was happy or not. That'd be a fun project.
Oh, I love that.
To make over a weekend. You can do anything, any status, right, that is important to your project, to your original point around being agile. What are our metrics of success for our Scrum?
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that that reminded me of is what we do for the kids' daily stand-up is a visual schedule, which just tells them everything that they need to do in order to like get ready to go to school in the morning or to get ready for bed at night. This cut down on probably 90% of nagging and arguments, because now it's just go look at your board. And because the board is in charge, they don't get mad at me.
So this is really about redirecting their anger towards the boss, to the man, the larger system, right? You know, sticking it to the man.
Exactly. And this works for older kids as well, because a lot of times you can just do like a checkboard, done or needs to be done. You know, if it's a larger thing that they might have to do several steps, you could bake an in progress portion.
This sounds like a more sophisticated kind of software engineering perspective on, you know, the gold star system, right? Where you get a whiteboard or you get a dry erase marker and you get some stickers, and it's a big old checklist, but it's all about visible work.
Exactly. And making the work visible is, I mean, I can't even say often enough how important that is, because when the work is visible, everybody in your family understands how much you're doing, any member. And it does help with just like picking up the slack, or even just being understanding if somebody's having sort of a bad day or they're in a bad mood. You can kind of look at their day and be like, oh, I can see that maybe they were a little spent, and so they were kind of cranky.
Hi, friends. As a programmer, you think in objects. With MongoDB, so does your database. MongoDB is the most popular document-based database built for modern application developers in the cloud era. Millions of developers use MongoDB to power the world's most innovative products and services, from cryptocurrency to online gaming, IoT, and more. You can try MongoDB today with Atlas, the global cloud database service that runs on AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. Configure, deploy, and connect to your database in just a few minutes. Check it out at mongodb.com/atlas. That's mongodb.com/atlas. The thing that we've been doing at work recently is this thing called Objective Key Results, OKRs. It's kind of another way of thinking about what our tasks are and whether or not they're successful. So it's one thing to check a box, but another thing to do a task and then measure it. Is there any kind of success metrics as a family? Like, you know, it's one thing to say, yeah, I got the groceries, but, you know, did it go well, or am I measuring how things went? Maybe groceries aren't a good example, but I think you get where I'm going.
Yeah. So we do, at the end of our sprint, have a retro where we kind of ask like what worked for our family this sprint and what didn't work for our family this sprint. But we don't kind of do a daily, like, this is kind of what went well or didn't go well.
Sure.
But at the end of a sprint, we do evaluate what worked for us as a whole family, because maybe something worked for one person, but it didn't work for somebody else. I find that this becomes a bigger deal when you're talking about self-care. Because when you're trying to find time to go and spend by yourself, sometimes the time that you choose doesn't work for the rest of your family. And you kind of have to tweak when that happens. But everyone should be doing self-care. But the thing that I always like to say is it is not the answer. It will not solve your problem, because I don't know how many times I've gone off to like have a bath or read a book, and the problems that were already facing me just feel either monumental when I get done with my self-care time, or it's all I can think about while I'm doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. I mean, self-care is important just for our sanity, but it does certainly was not going to make any problems go away.
Yeah, you just ignore them for a few minutes.
Absolutely. Now there was I think the TED Talk that you probably saw, that people have seen before. Bruce Feiler has a book called The Secrets of Happy Families, and he talks about Scrum being potentially the savior of the modern American family. Do we think that this little bit of structure that we're talking about is the thing that is the missing piece for our busy lives and our connected lives?
I certainly think so. I mean, the amount of significant increase in happiness and increase in efficiency, decrease in budget that I have seen since we started using Agile is huge. My toddlers are certainly more excited that we're asking them for their input, because often 4 and 5-year-olds aren't asked, and they love to give you their opinion.
You know, and that's an interesting one, because as with all, we won't call them junior engineers, your 4 and 5-year-olds. We'll call them early career engineers. As early career young people, right? Their opinion matters, but there still is a business problem that needs to be solved here. So, for example, my 12-year-old hates going shopping, but the option is don't eat.
Yeah.
So we try to explain it to him, like, okay, this is some distasteful work that needs to be done. This is a piece of work that's no fun, but the goal is, eat. So, how do you want to solve that?
So a lot of times how I solve that is, one, asking a way that we can make going to the grocery store more fun, or asking if there is an alternative solution. So like my 5-year-old can't go to the grocery store. It's too overwhelming for him. So usually one parent stays home and the other parent goes to the store. And that may change as he gets older, because he may not be as overwhelmed by the store. But
sure.
Right now,
but that gets to your point about building to your strengths, right? Maybe they could prep the kitchen to receive the food as it comes home soon.
Yes, exactly. And there's always something that they can do to feel like they are participating in the family, whether or not it be the main task that you would really like for them to do. And obviously, sometimes my 5-year-old has to go to the grocery store. And when he does, we just try and like sing songs and dance and just make it fun, even while we're in the store, even if everybody's kind of looking at us like we're crazy.
Well, and the thing to remember is that if we take this agile system or analogy to the fullest extent, right, at its core, it is about each team member having an equal contribution to the project, right? Everyone has a piece of this project, in this case, the family. So everyone's contribution is valued. And, even hanging out with the family and being chill at the grocery store is a valuable thing, because it made your job easier, getting groceries. If they're freaking out, that's not helpful.
Exactly. And I think it's also just important for them to see. So like at the meeting, when we talked about the grocery store and trying to go there, we literally wrote down every idea that they came up with. So it might have been like the silliest idea, and it might have seemed crazy to us, but you just write it down anyway. And then at the end of the meeting, you kind of go through all of the options and you come up with the one that is mutually desirable and physically feasible.
Interesting. Okay. And we have kids of different ages. Sometimes I'll mention to my wife that we should, ask the 12-year-old something, formerly 11-year-old, and she'll say, "Well, he doesn't know, he's 12. What's his contribution going to be?" How do you know whether to really value their opinion or to just dismiss it?
Well, sometimes I just write it down anyway, and then when we come to the end of when we're having the discussion, we'll say, "This doesn't work for me because." And then we give sort of a brief explanation as to why that doesn't work for us. For us, it's super brief, because I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they'll be 3 and 5 next month. Crazy. Because it just seems
it only accelerates. I tell you that. How
Yeah.
do you, but there are people who say that, and perhaps rightfully so, that children are not tiny humans. They're not tiny adults. They are children. And they could argue that they don't have logic. I wonder what's a good amount of structure, what's a good amount of logic, and what's just good old fashioned parenting. Like, oh, you just tell the kid what to do. How do you balance that?
So we just are super collaborative here. And the reason being is because I'm trying to teach them how to deal with being collaborative in the future. But also,
Good
like,
point.
there are just some things that you just have to do. So then we just sort of explain why we have to do it. And then we sort of tell them, afterwards, we might be able to do this fun thing, but we have to do this thing first. And that's just how life's going to be sometimes. Like, sometimes you're not going to like hanging out with a certain person, or you're going to have a hard boss, or you're not going to want to go to the grocery store, or you're going to want to do something fun versus something that you have to do, like study in college. But sometimes you just have to make these hard choices, or you have to do these things that are not your favorite in order to be able to do something that's your favorite later.
Right. You talked about a little bit about this in episode 41 of your podcast in December last year, the idea of holding firm on boundaries. So someone might be listening to this podcast and thinking, well, this is some weird, squishy stuff that, Yvonne and Scott are talking about. They're going to do Agile and the kids are going to collaborate, 2-year-old. But we're not saying no boundaries. We're not saying that the kids do anything that they want to. There's still a leadership structure here, but it is a very collaborative and positive one.
And I find that it actually leaves me more in charge because I've asked the kids for their opinion. They're much more likely to do things when I say, well, we just have to do this right now. We have to go to the grocery store because it's something that we have to do in order to stock the pantry. And I can't take you home, or daddy's out of town, so it's just me and you, and we all have to go.
Right.
They're just much more amicable to going because they don't have to feel like they're never heard.
Right. That's a good point. If you are spending every single day saying, because I said so, which we all agreed as when we were kids was a really lousy answer. Because I said so is an answer. It's just not the awesome one. But if you get a voice more often than not, then when the time comes along and it's like, well, I really just need to get the groceries, okay, all right, well, they hear me on most things, but I'm starting to recognize that this grocery thing we do every week is pretty important, and they take your word for it.
Yeah, exactly. And also just even on things that are like discipline. We actually had a problem with the bathroom and like going to the bathroom and not like sitting under the table and pretending like you don't have to go. So we had a conversation about like what would
classic project management issue, I tell you.
Yeah. So it's like, what would make this easier? And then we had a discussion where we asked him what would make it easier for him to just not want to hide or just get up and go. And, the solution was that maybe he could have his tablet while he went to the bathroom for a few minutes in order to focus on something else rather than the fact that he's sitting there with nothing to do.
Okay.
And that's worked. Like we're not having this fight anymore. I mean, it's a weird fight to feel like you're having, but I know so many parents, especially of toddlers and early elementary school kids, who are there.
Let me tell you, with a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, you would be surprised how many scrums we'll say, how many sprints are bathroom-related sprints. It does not get any better. There may be less cleanup, but it's a different kind of cleanup. And there's socks on the ground in the bathroom right now, and I'm not going to pick them up. So I'm afraid that they are lousy roommates their entire lives. So you're going to expect another 16 to 18 years of bathroom-related scrums. So
it's good to know. So we're not alone. Anybody out there listening, you are definitely not alone.
So you've been on, you have your own podcast, and you've been on a couple of other podcasts like the Nurturing Habitat and Boss Mom, talking about agile home management, and you're turning this into a business as well.
Yes, because I found that even people who use Agile every single day didn't really know how to bring it home.
It's not an obvious thing until you kind of start exploring and you're going, oh, I could see how I could run my house like a project. It wasn't immediately intuitive to me that we had been doing this, maybe not as effectively as you had, but until I started really thinking about it, it didn't seem intuitive.
Yeah. I mean, and it seems hard because you're used to doing it one way. And then when you try and think of how you would do it at home or how you would shift it a little bit, it's not automatically obvious what that shift would be. For instance, our daily stand-ups are essentially just like going over the schedule. Whereas your daily stand-up at work would be a little bit more involved than that because you're working in an environment where other people are dependent on the stuff that you didn't finish the day before in order to move forward onto something they need to do. Whereas that maybe isn't the case at home.
Right. And at home, it'll be very age dependent. My son's working on a report right now. That might be our Scrum, and it might have some, not doing something one day might have some future ramifications, but a 5-year-old might not have that much persistence of objects that a 14-year-old would.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, folks can check you out at Yvonne Marcus. That's Yvonne, Marcus, Marcus. We'll make sure to put links in the show notes to your website and to your Facebook community and your podcast. Thank you so much for chatting with me today about being agile at home.
Thank you for having me.
This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.